As many of you know, the title of the conference is Tearing Down Walls, Achieving Religious Equality in Turkey. And you think of the word equality, and a lot of us, we take that term for granted. And it's important to realize, and I touched upon it briefly last night, but I want to expound upon that a little here today, that the emphasis on equality is not something that the Archons thought up. It's not, I got together with Dr. Rockas and with Judge Bosnellis, and we said, well, we want to talk about equality. That idea came from the members of the minority community. They're the ones that wanted to hear about equality, not the Order of St. Andrew. They told us that that is one of the most important issues for them. We had a meeting in September 2012. There had to have been 8, 9 representatives of minority communities. And I remember Mr. Burmack said, representative of the Levy community, you got to talk about equality. You got to talk about equality. He was very emphatic. And he sort of threw me off guard. I really didn't appreciate that that was the issue. Then after the meetings, I talked to Mene Yildirim. I referred to her last night, and I said, Mene, is equality the issue? And she said, yes, equality is the issue, but also bring up the concepts of pluralism and state neutrality. And so that aspect of the program was really formed through representatives of the minority community and through Mene in subsequent conversations. And then we thought, well, how can you achieve equality? How can you achieve state neutrality? How can you achieve pluralism in any country? And to do that, you have to change the laws. You have to have a legal framework which will allow for that. And so and when we thought of that, we thought, we'll focus on what does the Constitution in Turkey, the current Constitution, provide for those rights? And, and then what could be in the new Constitution to help improve on equality, pluralism, and the concept of state neutrality. And that's why a large part of tomorrow is focusing on the Constitution, the old Constitution, what it provides, and what possibly could come down the road in a new Constitution. But I want to just harken back to the meeting I had with the minority representatives, because it ties into something I'm about to bring up. I can remember when people were talking about equality, and I know some people around the room, they had a look of sadness in their face, because I take it for granted in the United States that I'm treated equally, or at least I hope I'm treated equally, and I know there's a mechanism in place. But after that meeting, I really appreciated what the concept of equality means. And I became, I thought about it, I'll just leave it at this. I became appreciative of where I came from and what it means, and it made me want to even make this conference even more successful, because I realized to a lot of the people in this room, equality is what it's all about. That is the name of the game. And so with that, I just want to talk about equality very briefly and give you my idea of equality and what really, I think, since the initial meetings with the representatives, really brought home the idea of equality and why we need equality in Turkey. I'm going to be very brief, but in my brief remarks on equality, I'm going to ask a few questions. And the first question I want to ask is, who in this room is a one? There are people in this room that are a one. You know who you are. There are people in this room that are a 2. You know who you are. There are people in this room that are a 3. You know who you are. There are people in this room that are 4. You know who you are. There are people in this room who know who you are. You're a 5. And there are some of you that I know are looking at me and they're saying, what is George Rockas talking about? One of the most disturbing things on the whole concept of equality was revealed this summer. It was revealed with an incident dealing with an Armenian mother, but it was written about by Orhan Cengiz. And the title of this article that was published is Turkey's Secret Ancestry Codes track non-Muslim minorities. And what it was discovered, and no one knew this before, is that Turkey assigns a number to each of the minorities. Greek Orthodox, you're a 1, Armenian a 2, Jew 3, Syriac 4, and all other non-Muslim minorities 5. And I just want to read very briefly from the article written by Orhan Cengiz. And he writes, research and interviews with officials following the news reports confirmed a century-long saga of discrimination, registering populations using ancestry codes dates back to the 1923 Lausanne Treaty. According to Radical's findings, that's a publication, the Population Directorate codes Greeks using the number 1, Armenians 2, and Jews 3. Officials told Radical that ancestry codes are only for regulating who will be allowed to enroll in the educational institutions of minorities. Well, and then he goes on to write that further research revealed, well, other people are coded. Syriacs are 4, other non-Muslims 5. And the Turkish government said, well, we only code people for educational purposes. And it turns out that's not true. They code people for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I frankly, as an Orthodox Christian, I literally came to tears when I read that. And it reminded me of unthinkable things that actually happened in this country. And it made me think. What word should come to everyone's mind after what I just said? What word? It's a word that no one likes to have associated with them. The word, and I say this after giving it a lot of thought, the word is apartheid. That is what's going on in Turkey, a system of religion-based apartheid. And that description, or that isn't a phrase I came up with. Other authors, human rights lawyers, scholars have used that phrase with respect to how religious minorities are treated in a number of countries. But why do I say that? Well, if you know anything about the South African system, they coded people. They had a classification system. People were classified as whites, honorary whites, Asians, blacks, and mixed race. And ironically, that classification system was used for a number of different purposes, including what school you'd be allowed to attend. And that is the pretext that the government of Turkey used for coding. We'll give you a 1, you got to go to a Greek school. You go to a 2, you go to an Armenian school. And the similarities are actually quite amazing when you look at the issue. And so, and again, which category you fell into determine your rights. And so the question that I think everyone has to ask, because this is just I don't want to say it's my opinion. I'd like to say it's a matter of fact. Some people will say, well, that's only your opinion. And I pose the question to the audience, does Turkey have a system of religious-based apartheid? To truly solve the problems in Turkey, to truly solve the problem of inequality, the country of Turkey is going to have to address that issue. Because only when it addresses that issue and only come to grips with a term that no one likes to be identified with, I think only real progress will be made. And again, the facts of Mr. Cengiz's article speak for themselves. You can't defend the indefensible. Who can defend a coding system? I suspect that there's not anyone here that has the courage to defend the coding system. And the problem with the coding system is one of the problems is its lack of transparency. No one knew this system even existed until this summer. And why didn't people know? If it didn't have a bad purpose, if it wasn't for a nefarious motive, if it wasn't for a discriminatory motive, why didn't people know? Why weren't people told 75 years ago about being coded? because the fact of the matter is, it was used for a bad purpose. This conference is called, Tearing Down Walls, Achieving Religious Equality in Turkey. But I submit to you, and I pose yet another question: what could this conference also have been called? It could have been called Tearing Down the Walls of Religious Apartheid in Turkey. That would have been another appropriate term. And what I'm saying is really, it's a sad reality. Turkey claims to be a model of freedom and democracy in the Muslim world. And it is not. You only have to look at the coding system. And I know some people, when you listen to the government officials, they say, we're a democratic nation because we have free elections and whoever wins gets to control the government. Well, that's not a democracy. Just because you have a majority that thinks they can do whatever they want, that is the recipe for disaster. You can consult people in this room, constitutional scholars, that'll tell you if you take that attitude, it is only a recipe for future trouble. And I want to leave you with a couple last thoughts. First, I want to leave you with what I believe is a fundamental truism. No civil society accepts apartheid. No civil society can tolerate apartheid. No country wants to be known as a country that has a system of apartheid. We can disagree on a lot of things, but I think we can all agree on that. In closing, I ask the government of Turkey to give the minorities equality, to get rid of the code. There is no reason to have a code. Do not code your own people. And when I was finishing my remarks last night, I thought of His All Holiness. The reason, I work for all minorities, but I have undivided loyalty to the Ecumenical Patriarch, and I thought about him, and I thought about the coding system as applied to him. When I think of His All Holiness, I think of the Ecumenical Patriarch. I think of the leader of 300 million Orthodox Christians. I think of one of the most popular and recognized figures in the world, religious figures. I think of a man that a few years ago was voted one of the 100 most influential people in the world. But then I thought, unfortunately, his government does not recognize the term ecumenical. Unfortunately, his government says he's just the bishop, the Rum Patriarch, the Fenar bishop, the bishop to the Greek minority. Unfortunately, his government, the Patriarch feels persecuted. He felt, and we all know on 60 Minutes, he felt like he was being crucified. And now, and I would never put words in his mouth, but when some people think of His All Holiness, they're going to think of what? They're going to think he's a one, this great man, because that's what the government of Turkey considers him to be. I think that is terrible. I think it's despicable. I think it's indefensible. And again, I ask and call upon the government of Turkey to do away with your coding system. If you want to be part of civil society, you cannot allow that system to stand. It is indefensible.